Alright, I don't even know really where to start with this one, but I already have footage for it, so we're just gonna roll with it. Also, I don't have a script for this because I just didn't have the time to write a script, and it really doesn't even warrant having a script. And you're probably wondering, why doesn't it warrant a script? Well, in short, the sword's bad. It's not good. I only have 2 clips of it before the modifications, and that was literally just me dragging it across my hand, and it did nothing. It didn't cut at all. And it's because the blade was so thick. On the Cult of Athena website, it lists the blade as 5.1 millimeters at the base to 2 millimeters at the tip, which is already pretty thick in the first place. I mean, my longsword only has about 4.3 millimeters at the base, and that's a two-handed sword. So for an arming sword, 5 millimeters is pretty thick. I don't even think it was 5 millimeters. I actually think it was more than 5 millimeters, probably about like 6, if I had to take a guess. And if we know anything about geometry, then we know that you need a steep angle if you want something that's going to actually have an edge. Now, realistically, we know that there's really big wedge axes, and you could probably put a really fine edge on that. But another problem was that the actual edge geometry for this sword as well was kind of an apple seed shape. So that meant that it's really convex, I believe is the word for it. Making it rounded means that it doesn't have that steep, sharp angle. This would also make it much harder to sharpen as well without some sort of belt grinder. And even if I did have a belt grinder, the convex angle was so intense, for lack of a better word, that it was almost just rounded on the edges. There was nothing that I could really do without completely grinding it off. And I didn't have a belt grinder handy, so I asked for help from a friend of mine named RJ. Shout out to him and South Coast Swords. If you need any Black Fencer stuff, go there. But anyways, he was able to help me out, and basically what we had to do was grind off about like half the blade's worth of metal. And that's where we're at now with how I can't really even review the sword, because I couldn't review it beforehand for its usability because it was literally no usability at all. You wouldn't be able to cut anything with it, and this is a sword that Cult of Athena sold as sharp. And whenever they sell something as sharp, besides the fact that you expect it to be sharp, they also don't give their Cult of Athena sharpening service for an extra $15, $20, $30 or something like that. So that means that whatever the edge was going to be on it, that's how it was going to be. And it's not like they could even sharpen it without doing a complete overhaul to the blade like we had to do, because it was just way too thick to begin with. And another thing is that Cult of Athena didn't even state that. They didn't explain that there's a reason why it was called the limited version. It wasn't because it was like a special edition limited run. It's because it's a specific design by Kingston Arms in partnership with Angus Trim. And according to a much more helpful store page on the Sword Buyer's Guide, they explained it all that they didn't like the original design that they had planned out for this sword, but they already made a few, like a small batch, and some of the problems was the grip color they didn't like, and it doesn't match the scabbard, which is true, it doesn't. And something about how they didn't like the shape of the pommel, but then they kind of said one thing at the end that they just kind of cast aside, which was really important, was that it was 3 ounces heavier than it should have been. And I can tell you that I felt that. It felt like you were swinging a crowbar. Pair that with the fact that it wasn't really sharp to begin with. I think that heaviness came with the thickness of the blade. So basically the sword was unusable until we finally ground off a bunch of the metal off of it, and it looks completely different, so I can't even really review it on the looks beforehand. Although one thing that did strike me is that it did have a really nice mirror polish to it. Although the mirror polish did scratch easily, it was very shiny. You could see your reflection perfectly in it, but that's gone now. But now with all that metal ground off, it's really lightweight, it feels lively in the hand, and it cuts well. But I can't really review it on that now, can I? The one thing that I can say about it is that it's 9260 spring steel, like it does say. You can tell because when you hit it, it has that singing sound.
I'll try that again. Hold on.
The reverberance in it, really nice. I accidentally hit my cutting stand, and even after we ground the living hell out of it, the blade held up. So that's how you know 9260 is just that resilient. But really, I guess a review doesn't even matter in the first place because you can't really even buy the sword because it was a limited version. Although, I guess one thing you can take away from this is that, one, I don't particularly like Kingston arms anymore, so that's one thing. And two, if Cult of Athena says it's sharp, I think you'd want to be skeptical of what they determine as sharp, because this didn't even cut anything. I couldn't even get it to cut a sheet of paper. And it's a shame because I wish I had more footage of me trying to do things like actually attempt practice cutting with it or cutting a sheet of paper, because I did do that. I just didn't record it. So that's pretty much it. I'm just going to upload this so that people know my thoughts on the sword that they might have seen in the sword cutting compilation that I did with all the other swords. And this one cut probably the best, but that's because we put like a hair shaving sharp edge on it. And honestly, at the end of the day, I don't think I was completely screwed over buying this sword because it's a solid construction. The pommel's peened, the grip is on tight, and it has a sharp edge on it now. And funny enough, it kind of, the way it looks now with the heavy grind marks on it, and you can see like the really deep grind marks on the edge, it kind of reminds me of a sword from Kingdom Come Deliverance. I think it was specifically Thumper. And Thumper was a long sword that had like huge grind marks on it, a lot of pitting. This sword doesn't have pitting, but still. And it had terrible slash damage to it, which I find ironic to this sword as well. It had terrible slash damage to it, but it had like the highest blunt damage. So you could literally bludgeon people to death with this long sword in the game. And I loved it so much because it was a massive meme. And you could literally knock people unconscious with it because it was just such a big, bulky sword that didn't cut anyone. It just beat people to death. So yeah, that's it for this one. I'll have other sword reviews out soon. Hopefully some more in-depth ones with a lot more content to it. I just got this one out quickly because I knew I'd get this video done quick. And that way, if anyone had any questions about this sword or anyone was just my thoughts on Kingston arms, here you go. That's my experience so far with them. Anyways, I know this video is probably not the greatest, but if you liked it, go ahead and hit that like button. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, better experience with Kingston arms, let me know. I'll be reading them. If you want to see more sword reviews and much more in-depth sword reviews than this one, then subscribing would be your best bet. I do plan on releasing more. I plan on having a katana review, 2 longsword reviews, a Meow Dao review, and a Dudao review coming up soon. So if any of those interest you, then stay tuned. They should be out sometime. But that's it. Thank you for watching, especially if you got to this part. I appreciate you. Peace.